Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. My name is Meg Glick, and I am a social worker at the Child Mind Institute. To meet the unprecedented mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, the Child Mind Institute has gone borderless. We're here with gold standard clinical care, advice, and resources for children and families wherever you are, all online and accessible to everyone. Here's what we can do to support you during this crisis. We are providing gold standard mental health care remotely for new and existing patients with telehealth while maintaining the same high quality care. We have free comprehensive resources for families at childmind.org/coronavirus. You can sign up for daily parenting tips at childmind.org. And on Facebook, my colleagues and I are answering your questions just like this at 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Our Facebook group for parenting during the time of coronavirus is also up and running. We're here for you wherever you are. Please contact us for further questions about how we can help. I hope you'll take advantage of our resources and share them with your networks. Today, we will be discussing supporting teenagers and young adults during the coronavirus crisis. I'm going to do my best to answer all your questions on this topic and others, but if we run out of time, there are two ways that you can get what you need. We'll be right back here at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning to answer more questions. And we also have a team looking through your questions daily. They'll incorporate answers into our resources on childmind.org. Okay, so now we're going to get started with discussing some of the points that were brought up in an article actually posted on our website entitled Supporting Teenagers and Young Adults During the Coronavirus Crisis. And that was posted by Caroline Miller. A lot of information has been posted about what to do with young school-aged children, particularly those in elementary and middle school, as well as preschoolers. However, we recognize that lots of teens and young adults are also home both from high school and from college and really need a specialized kind of support. There are particular developmental features for those age groups that make this crisis especially challenging to manage with your teenager or young adult at home. So I would love to just go through some of the pieces of what that looks like and some specific tips for dealing with teenagers and young adults who are home with you. What you will notice is that while young kids are probably very excited to have some extra time, some one-on-one time with their parents, teenagers and young adults likely feel differently. This is probably a time where they're feeling more frustrated by not seeing their friends and having to spend more time just with the family. And what I can tell you is that this is actually something that we really do expect as developmentally appropriate for that age group. Teenagers and young adults are actually meant to be spending more time building social relationships outside of the family system. It's the developmental task that we actually expect them to be mastering at this stage. The tough part about the coronavirus crisis for them is that right now they are really mostly confined to being at home with their family system. So they don't have as much access to those social networks, and that certainly is impacting how they're feeling about this situation and likely how they're managing this crisis with you at home. So a few tips that we can go through together, and also please feel free to write in your questions during the chat and we will get to those as quickly as we can. But some tips that have come up throughout the article, as well as probably posted on other pieces of our social network, are things about how to emphasize this piece of social distancing while still allowing your teenager or young adult with the opportunity to access their friends and their social networks. So what we know is that many kids are probably having a difficult time with the idea that they have to be separate from those social networks. At first, this might have been an issue of having difficulty complying with social distancing regulations. So you may have had a teenager coming home and saying, hey, I'm really frustrated, or I don't want to stay home. Maybe their friends were actually going out and still seeing other teenagers, and they were posing some questions to you about why they needed to do this. This is challenging. Teens definitely think of themselves as invincible and might not really see the risk as so significant. So this is just an opportunity for you to talk through, right? Just like with other situations where their friends may have different rules and regulations in their homes than you do, really saying that this is not something that you're comfortable with, even though someone else's parents might be. So letting them know that while they might be comfortable taking a risk with their own health, they would be impacting the health of the whole family system. And so this is a rule that they have to follow, and really talk that through. The same way that you would talk through things like curfews, right, or other types of guidelines that you have in your home. At the same time, we also really want to validate and understand the frustration that teenagers and young adults are feeling right now, and use this as an opportunity to do some collaborative problem solving and talk through ways and solutions for how they can still maintain those social relationships. So collaborative problem solving is a big and fancy term that can be broken down into some do's and don'ts. So I'm happy to talk those pieces through so that you guys get an understanding of what we mean by that. And what I'll say is that collaborative problem solving is a concept that applies far outside of the coronavirus crisis. It's something that we think about using with teenagers and young adults and even younger children all the time, not just in this current context. So some do's. Think about setting up a time to speak to your child ahead of time. So meaning actually schedule this as a time to sit down and talk, rather than bombarding your child when they're in the middle of another activity. Maybe they're on the phone with friends, maybe they're in the middle of their schoolwork, wanting to respect that they too might have a schedule that they have in their minds and wanting to make sure that they're open and available for this conversation when it needs to happen. So set aside a time to talk in advance rather than bombarding them. Listen to how they're feeling about the current crisis, what the things are that they're disappointed by, the things that are making them feel frustrated, and take some time to hear that without interruption. Just the way that we would want someone to listen to us, think about listening to your teenager or young adult in the same way. Hear them, reflect back what you hear them say. So if you hear them say, I'm feeling frustrated, validate that. If you hear them say that they're feeling angry or disappointed, validate that. Even if we know that some of the things your teenager or young adult might be expressing are perhaps more egocentric, more focused on things that are happening to them rather than what's happening to the world, that's expected. And so we can still validate that those things are feeling frustrating. From there, it's really important to take some time before diving into problem solving to really think about highlighting the areas where your teenager has been successfully navigating this experience. Any small thing that you notice as a victory for them, an area where they have managed to stay calm, where they have managed to be flexible and adapt their schedules to fit the current needs, you want to highlight those and actually let them know that you really appreciate that they've been so flexible in those areas. And then you can move on to making your points, right, about the areas that you think that we need to still do some work on. So if there's specific things that you feel like we still need to address, then you're going to take some time at that point to really clearly and concisely share those concerns. Teenagers are very likely to tune out after a certain amount of time. So it's important to think about making your points, like I said, really concise. So if the concern is, hey, we are worried about the fact that you're not spending as much time as you're on your homework, or you're spending more time on screens than you normally do, and we want to problem solve that. Just make those points really clear and concise for them. After you do that, spend some time brainstorming solutions all together. So take some time together to think about ways that we could address the problem. You might have some ideas, but it's also really important to allow your teenager or young adult to share the ideas that they have as well. From there, pick something that you want to try. So if it has to do with screen time, right, you might have decided, hey, I really want you to have 2 FaceTime sessions with friends per day, and then think about taking a break and practice a musical instrument that you have, try to engage yourself in a yoga activity, do something that's not on the screen, right? And so that might be what we're problem solving. And after we decide on a plan, choose one solution together and test it out the following day. Predict success. Let your child know that you know that they're going to be able to get through this, that they'll be able to figure it out, and that you're all going to be able to figure it out together, and that things are going to get better. So letting your teen know that things really are going to improve, and we know that you're going to still be able to eventually get back to school or get to experience the things that you're looking forward to. And then leave space for continued discussion. So important to let your child know or your teen know that we're always available and we can continue to have these conversations whenever they need to. So those are the key steps of really a collaborative problem-solving conversation to have with a teenager. All right, so I'm getting a question here. How do you handle a child that is anxious? Oops, 1 second. I saw it and then it disappeared. Thanks for bearing with me. Here we go. How do you handle a child that is anxious? So they are following social distancing, no problem, but at times it seems to be shutting out the world altogether. How do you support them to get up, talk to a peer, etc.? Really, really great question. This is certainly an issue that's coming up for our more anxious kids, right? So this is actually, I talked about this in our prior Facebook Live as well, how for kids who have anxiety, who maybe have social anxiety or school refusal behaviors, for example, to start with, this time might not actually be such a disappointment. It actually might feel like an opportunity to actually get a break from something that in the past has felt really unpleasant or really challenging. So they might actually be enjoying the time spent inside. That is a challenge, and definitely the same collaborative problem solving strategies still apply, which is this idea of sitting down with that child and talking through, we know that this is really enjoyable, but we need to set up a schedule, right? We need to set up a schedule where our goal for the day is that you have one contact with a peer every day. Maybe that's too hard, and maybe we need to say, actually, you're going to have one FaceTime session with a peer this week. But think about, just as we always would with graduated hierarchies and exposures for anxiety, think about setting up that hierarchy with your child or your teen of one task, one brief task that they need to be able to accomplish during this time, and reward it, right? Really help them to make that choice with you, pick from some options, and then reinforce it. Allow them to do something that they really enjoy after they've accomplished that hurdle or gotten through that hurdle. It's a really great question and certainly a challenging piece, but leaving space for conversation is also still something that we want to be doing, leaving space for your child to engage with you about how they're feeling and how they're managing this crisis, and any new anxieties also that might be coming up. Another question. What about a night-sensitive 6-year-old? We've talked about things, and she says she has no questions, but I know she is very porous. Anything you suggest to say to her? I also haven't said school will likely be closed for the rest of the year in California, just said at least a few weeks. Is that okay? Great question. The truth is, right, we don't really know all of the answers. And so it's hard for us to give a clear timeline to kids, especially kids who might be anxious and typically need that. So I think it is appropriate just to say that we are not sure yet, right? And we will keep updating you. And so right now, we are not sure when school will be going back, but we'll keep letting you know what's happening. We really want to share the information in a developmentally appropriate way and think about the concrete steps that your child can actually do to stay safe and be helpful. So that's what I've been sharing with a lot of families, is actually talking a lot about the fears or the worries isn't something that's necessarily helpful for an anxious child, but giving them something that's concrete that they can do to try to be most helpful and keep themselves safe. That's going to be what helps them to stay as calm as possible during this time. And just like you said, kids may not be coming to you with questions. So the best thing that you can do is just leave space for that. So whether that's you set aside some time at night where you check in and you ask how they're feeling, they know that time is there and they know that's an opportunity to ask questions if they have them. You've done your job, right? So you don't need to press it as long as you're leaving that space and that opportunity for a conversation. These are really good questions. So keep the questions coming. I will continue to go through some other points that were addressed in the article, but please continue to ask questions. That's what makes this a fun way to engage. So another piece that had come up in prior questions that we wanted to address and that we addressed in this article are how to keep up schooling for our teenagers and young adults. This definitely looks different, right, than it does for our school-age children, our elementary school-age children, who you might be needing to kind of curate resources for and give educational activities. For teens and young adults, it's really about continuing to maintain and keep up with the expectations that school is setting. And for that, it can be helpful, right, for you to just be involved enough to help your child set a reasonable routine structure, a reasonable schedule for how they're going to get that done, particularly for children who have more challenges with their organizational skills or potentially do have ADHD and other executive functioning difficulties. They may need extra support from you, just like probably their teachers were providing in the classroom. They may need that extra support for keeping track of their assignments, making sure everything gets written down clearly, is visual, and is displayed for them in a way where they can check things off and really know that they're getting things accomplished. So that might be a role that you start playing that previously they had been doing on their own with their school team. This is particularly challenging, we know, for families with kids with ADHD or other learning disorders or other difficulties with mental health. And so one thing we want to acknowledge is that teachers, particularly special education teachers, have had a lot of training, right? And so you are on week 1 of the job. We do not expect that you are suddenly going to have all the skills and abilities to know exactly how to teach your child or scaffold these routines. You're doing your best. We are here to help with various resources on our website, and that's why we welcome questions as well. But really, give yourself a little bit of time to get used to this, and use that conversation with your teen to find out what was most helpful for them when they were in the classroom at school. You may also want to reach out to your child's teacher and school team to find out from them what extra supports your child might have been benefiting from when it comes to those organizational skills. Were they a child who really benefited from using the Google Classroom, for example, or were they a student that really benefited from having their assignments written out on a piece of paper? Just so that whatever it is that they were experiencing in school that was helpful, hopefully is carrying over as much as possible to the home environment. Another piece for teens and young adults that's really important for us to address is really these pieces of encouraging healthy habits throughout this time. Teenagers and young adults have a tendency to need some extra support with healthy habits already, meaning things like getting enough sleep, moving around and getting exercise, right? Getting off of the screens. We know that screen time is likely being relaxed, or the screen time limits are likely being loosened in your home right now, and that's appropriate. We get that, especially for teenagers. A lot of their social world is on the screen. And so we do want them to continue to have some extra access to that in order to be able to connect with friends and keep up and maintain those relationships. But they also then might need some support structuring or building in time to get air, get outside if possible, get some exercise, right? Take some breaks in order to really maintain those other healthy habits that we know are important for teenagers. They may need some support with things like keeping up hygiene routines, right? Making sure they are taking showers still regularly, that they're getting up, getting dressed. All of these things we know really are important for maintaining our mental health and well-being. So while we're maintaining our physical health, we're also helping ourselves to reduce feelings of anxiety and feelings of depression. So these are things we really want kids to be doing and might need parent support to do that. So what that looks like is think about setting up a schedule like we've talked about, making sure that your child still has a consistent sleep schedule and routine, that while they might be on screens more during the day, that they're still taking breaks from screen time before bed, doing something else so that they're able to get to sleep. And that they also are having consistent wake-up times where they're getting up, they're getting dressed, and they're starting their day, having a good breakfast, having a good lunch, having a good dinner. All of these things are really important for, like I said, maintaining that connection between our physical health and well-being and our mental health and well-being. So we also know that we may need to adjust back to some routines as we get closer to returning to school, and that's okay. That's something that we can address as we get down the line. If you have loosened up screen time, for example, we can certainly talk about and work with families around how to get back to regular routines. But these are the pieces that we think are essential that we still want to keep as part of your child's day-to-day experience. The good news is, by doing all of this with your teenager, these are also really good pre-college habits and skills. So these are things that we know that a college student needs to be able to scaffold a bit independently. And so by setting up your child or your teenager with a really good structure and routine right now, helping them to learn how to take breaks between work periods, how to structure in exercise opportunities, how to make meals that are healthy, these are actually all really good pre-college skills that you're building right now. So I think that is one silver lining that we can look at, is you've got a little bit more time to help your child to learn how to do that. So I'm looking to see if there are any additional questions. Feel free to throw them into the chat, and if we don't get to them today, we'll certainly circle back to them and hopefully address those tomorrow on the following Facebook Lives. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. Oh, I have one more. How to help high schoolers deal with disappointment with canceled or postponed events. Awesome question. This has been coming up a lot. Your teenager may have been looking forward to, and probably was looking forward to, a whole variety of events, particularly a high schooler, thinking about things like proms, sports events, especially for kids who are looking forward to participating in a sports team where they might have expected to have a championship coming up, or potentially they were going to be the team captain, anything that was really significant to their identity development. This is disappointing. Graduations, right? All of these activities are things that your child was looking forward to. They were important for their development, and there's something that they're likely disappointed about. validate it. Really, there's not so much else we can do besides be there and listen, hear the concerns, hear how your child is feeling, and validate that emotion. But also let them know that we know that they're going to be okay, right? So if your child, for example, is concerned, some questions have been coming up about children who are feeling a lot of concern or pressure about the fact that they're not getting to do all the extracurriculars that maybe would have built their college resume, or they're having those kind of anxieties and worries. Let your child know that you know that's going to be okay, right? We're going to find other ways to keep you active and busy, and everyone understands. So if that's part of the worry and concern for your child, try to help them to realize that that's something that we can take care of and we're going to help with. But otherwise, if your child's just feeling disappointed, like I said, validate it and then try to find some things to look forward to and some things to fill their days that do feel enjoyable and fun. All right. One last question, which is any help with structuring schoolwork? For sure. So one piece of advice that can work here is just to make sure you're always keeping in mind that we should be thinking about having a more challenging activity before a preferred activity in the schedule. Think about breaking up the schoolwork into chunks of time where there's always something to look forward to afterwards if you get that done. So thinking about rewarding your teenager or young adult by having the ability to take a break, to have one of those FaceTime sessions with friends after they've completed an assignment. So task, preferred activity, task, preferred activity. That's how we really want to think about structuring that schoolwork time and building those breaks, because they will need them. Wonderful questions. I hope you all got something out of this Facebook Live today. And I want to thank you for joining me. We will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. doing the same thing to answer more questions. And the Child Mind Institute, like I've said, is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We have resources to help, from daily tips to consultations to gold standard telehealth treatments. Go to childmind.org/coronavirus, and I hope to see you all soon.